Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our meeting. I'm Hisham El-Sayed, founder of ERP Simply for All Group and solution architect for Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. Today, we have a special meetup for Agile Foundation. It will be 3 sessions to cover the key concept about Agile delivery. Let me share the rule for our session. Please respect it. Our topic for Agile only. No questions through the meeting, except it's very important, so you can stop us to ask if you can't understand something very major, and we will clarify it. Please send your question in chat box, and we will answer as much as we can after the session for 10-15 minutes. Let me introduce and welcome with John Dobin. John Dobin, one of the expert, and has a survey in this field. John Dobin is an Agile thought leader based in Dubai. He was early adopter for Agile Pack in the early 2000s and has led Agile transformations for many organizations in Asia and the Pacific, also in Middle East. He has worked hand-ons in different of roles across several many methodologies, including XP, Scrum, and DevOps. He designed a course for curriculums for international consortium of Agile and their partners, and is involved with particular research with the Business Agility Institute. Welcome, John. The mic is yours now.
Salam alaikum, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening. So just while I'm setting up, I wonder if everyone would just like to, I just want to get a gauge of how much Agile experience this audience have. So in your chat, could you just type how many years you've been involved in Agile? So it might be 0 if you had none, or 1 year or 2 years, just to see how many years you've been experienced with. Thank you. 0, 1, 3. Okay, we've got a bit of a mixed bag there. Excuse me while just setting this up. All right. So what I want to do today is to really look at the origins of Agile, the foundations of Agile. Because in my work, I find there's a lot of confusion about what Agile is. And also there's a misconception that Agile is this new thing and that hasn't really been tested in time. And what I wanted to do is to go through 4 quite important points here that first of all, sorry, Hisham is just telling me that I have to admit the people. So just excuse me for 1 minute. Admit all. Is there an automatic setting that I can do, Hisham, to let them all in at the same time, or not? Do I have to keep on doing it?
The first, just in the first 5-10 minutes, you can admit the people.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Just let me know again by chat, because otherwise I can't see it.
Okay.
All right. So what I want to do is I wanted to get through 4 points in the next hour. And the first point that I want to make is that Agile was a solution to the waterfall problem. And so I want to look at in a minute what that waterfall problem is, and then how Agile solved it. And the next point I want to make is that Agile, or the ideas, the foundation ideas of Agile have been around for a long, long time. And in fact, you know, the earliest ideas of Agile, or what is now included in Agile, are nearly 100 years old. So these principles that Agile is built on have been industry proven for a long, long time, although Agile itself is only 20 years old. The third point that I want to get through is that Agile is very closely related to Lean. And in fact, we can actually call it a subset or a part of Lean. And towards the end, I wanted to focus on what people call the Agile Mindset. And the Agile Mindset is about embodying the values and the principles encoded in the Agile Manifesto. And so from this foundation, what we can do is we can build on our knowledge of Agile. And it's a really good idea to understand these foundations because it gives Agile a lot more strength, the idea and the methods and the practices and the history, a lot more strength. And I hope you're going to find it quite interesting. So let's start. And I'm having a small technical problem. There we go. So we're going to start with the problem of waterfall. Now, the first paper that really captured the waterfall problem was written in 1970 by Winston Walker Royce. Now, he worked for Lockheed and he was in charge of creating programs for space programs. And he wrote this paper that described the current state of programming as being very problematic. And in that paper, he had this diagram, which everyone later after him, he didn't call it himself, but after he wrote the paper, everyone referred to this diagram as a waterfall diagram. And back in the 70s, we've got to remember that computing was very different to what it was today. The computers were very large mainframe devices. They had much, much, much less power than the smartphones that we all carry in our pockets today. And a lot of the programming was done on punch cards. And so there was this process. And so the process began with gathering the requirements. So we want to put a satellite into space. And I've just been asked to just interrupt for 1 second to let more people in. One moment. Okay. There's no way you can do co-hosting. Is there a way that I can do co-hosting or not? Never mind. So back in the day, we first of all gathered the requirements, what satellites had to go to space. That would then dictate some software requirements. And then there'd be an analyst, should I say, that would then write those software requirements up into a very large specification document. And that would then go into program design, and then that would be handed over to the coders, and the coders would then test it before heading off to operations. Now, what Winston Walter Royce wrote about in this paper in 1970 was that the first time the code was really put into a position to see if it was working was after a very long process. And that if there was a problem in testing, you needed to go back into the program design phase. And often that meant that there was something wrong with the assumptions in the first place, which meant it had to go back into the software requirements phase. And what that meant is that in some cases, you had to do 100% of recoding. And this is a massive problem back in 1970. And I learnt my coding in 1980. I was at university, and the solution that I was taught to overcome this problem was lots and lots of documentation, so that at any point, if there was a problem, you could go backwards through this process. And this was his solution to it as well. And so in the 80s, when we were writing COBOL programs for banks and things like that, we had lots and lots of documentation. So let's fast forward to the development of Agile. So Agile solved this problem many years later by creating an iterative way of working. So rather than going through a very large, long linear program to produce software at the end, Agile broke the program up into increments, and they would plan and they would build and they would ship an increment. And that increment was put in front of users or testers, and then you get immediate feedback, and that would then influence the planning and the building of the next phase. And by doing that, created massive efficiencies and improvements in deliverability. So how did Agile get there, and how did we come from Waterfall to Agile? So it was a long process. So you're probably aware of the Agile Manifesto in 2001, but really it started, the ideas that went into Agile started all the way back in 1930 with Statistical Process Control. And then it went into the Toyota production system, and out of that came the lean movement. And then around the mid-1980s all the way to 2000, there was lots and lots of changes, starting with product development. And then in 1995, there was Scrum. And all of this was trying to solve this waterfall problem, that we were trying to deliver software faster in a much more complex environment. And all of these different variations of Agile were invented to try to overcome this waterfall problem. And it all came together in the Agile Manifesto. But what I want to do is just to spend 15 minutes going over some of the key stepping stones that underpinned the Agile Manifesto. Because if we understand some of these stepping stones, it really gives us a very good grasp of what Agile is all about. Now, is my voice clear enough? Am I going slowly enough? Is that everyone listening and understanding?
Yes, John.
All good? Great. I can't see the chat panel in my window, so I've got no idea whether...
John, excuse me, can you make me host, and I will share my screen for the PDF, so you can ask me to move the page while we can admit more people. Okay?
Yeah.
It's good with you?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So just let me get out of here.
Yes, make me host, please.
Yep, doing that. There you go. Okay, can you go full screen there?
Okay, please continue.
Yep, the screen is cut off a bit. So if you just wanted to make the PDF a bit smaller or get rid of all of the tools, maybe there's a mode where you can I'm not familiar with Windows, I'm afraid. Sort of display, maybe there's a display theme. No, never mind. Whatever's best. We can be agile about it.
Okay, please continue.
Okay, so if you could just make, it's cut off some of the, it's cut off some of the slide a little bit there. Make the slide slightly smaller. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Next one. So the first stepping stone was Walter Shoehart in the 1930s. And he brought into operations management the idea of statistical process control. And his insight was that production systems were making lots of mistakes, and everyone kept on trying to reduce those mistakes. But he developed a method or a process where you would inspect the outputs and use those output measures to make new adjustments to the inputs. And this is quite radical at the time, because at the time, production was seen as a linear process. And what he did is he created a circular process. And although it seems quite obvious today, at that time, it was actually quite a breakthrough. And it was his idea that we should reflect on the outputs in order to change the inputs and keep going round and around in circles. That gave us the idea of iterative design. So the next slide, please. So the next big breakthrough, I suppose, in thinking was Edwards Deming in the 1950s. And Deming went to Japan as part of America's aid to Japan to rebuild after World War II, and in order to try to get their production processes working again. And he pushed upon the Japanese management companies this concept of a Deming wheel, or a PDSA cycle, where you'd plan for a change, a systems change or an improvement. You do that change on a small scale. So this is where we're trying to get the idea of increments. You'd study what the results of that change was. And then depending on those results, you'd either take the change on board, and this is usually a manufacturing process, it's not software at the moment. You'd take the change on board, or you'd abandon it and you'd plan it again. And so he's really built on Shoehart's circular process and made it much more formalized. And this had quite a large effect on Japanese industry, especially one very well-known Japanese manufacturer. So next slide. And we've probably heard of the Toyota production system. And the Toyota production system, Toyota was originally it made knitting machines, weaving machines. And then it went into car production, and they were really suffering. But they saw the idea of quality improvement and process control as being a strategic weapon, and they used this to grow their business tremendously between the 1950s and 1970s. So much so that their Toyota production system became a benchmark for American businesses. And so Deming went from America to Japan. Japan created the Toyota production system, and then that went back to America 30 years later. And the really important part in terms of Agile for the TPS was that Toyota production system was focused on eliminating waste. And when you get into serious Agile practices, everything is about eliminating waste, wasted time, wasted code, and wasted effort. And so what Toyota generated and experimented with their production system was absolutely instrumental for thinking a bit later on when it came to eliminating waste in code. Next slide. So the next piece of the puzzle, the next stepping stone, was Takachi and Nakata in 1986, and they did a paper with co-paper with MIT, and what they were looking at was why some manufacturing companies produced really popular products that worked and made a lot of profit, and others didn't. And they looked at lots of different products, not just cars, but things like photocopiers and cameras. And they saw that there was a big difference between the best teams and the worst teams, or the best companies and the worst companies. And they separated those into three types. And so the type A company, they described as like being a relay race, where first of all, some sort of a market analysis team would work out what the market wants, what the customer wants, and that would then go into some sort of a product. They would then hand those requirements over to a design team, and then that design team would then hand it over to an engineering team. The engineering team would then hand it over to a manufacturing team, and the manufacturing team would then hand it over to the product managers. And then there was a kind of a type B where there was a bit of an improvement, because that handover was very well done, very well documented, and very well good handshaking. But the best teams, the ones that really stood out, had a completely different format, and they called it a rugby approach. And they called it a rugby approach because it wasn't really handed off. And like in the same way in a rugby game, that all of the players take the ball up to the goal together, was how these authors saw the best design teams, the best product development teams working. And the key thing which they do is they would have a multidisciplinary team. They'd have the market research people, the engineers, the marketing people, the architects. They'd be on this team that would start with a project, and they'd work together all the way through until it was shipping. And that idea really, really influenced one of the first major software development practices, which formed one of the foundation pillars of Agile. Now, you're going to all get this PDF at the end of the presentation, and down the bottom left-hand side, you'll see a little arrows which says go deeper, and those are hyperlinks, and that will actually take you to the original papers if you wanted to go further into this. And if you're interested in Agile, I really recommend it, because it gives you a very solid understanding of how Agile works. All right, next slide, please, Sharp. So out of that rugby paper came the first really tightly formatted Agile method called Scrum. And they took this idea of multidisciplinary teams working together, and they kind of combined that with PDSA cycles, and they created Scrum. And I reckon you probably, I imagine you all know what Scrum is or have come across it, so I won't go into it too much. But what I hope you can see now is that Scrum wasn't invented out of blue sky. It had a lineage. It had these stepping stones of a lot of thinking over many years and a lot of practice that went in to build the elements of what we call Scrum. Interestingly, for those who are coming next week, I'll be coming straight out of a meeting with Sutherland and Schwaber, who are now going to be releasing this time next week the third Scrum Guide. So they're modifying it. And so I might, if you're on the call next week, I might be able to share with you some of the changes that's going on there. Okay, so now the next slide. So all of that then came together, and with And if you remember back a few slides ago, I said there was lots of other things being developed: XP, Crystal, Dynamic Systems Development Method, DSDM. There were lots of different methods and Scrum coming together. And some of the leading practitioners, software practitioners, came together in a ski lodge, the Snowbird Ski Lodge, in 2001. And they said, what's the common elements? What is the essence of what we're all trying to do with XP and Scrum and all of these different things? What is it that we're really trying to do? And over the course of a few days, they nutted out what is known as the Agile Manifesto for software delivery. And that's what we know as Agile today. So let's go to the next slide. So one way to see Agile is that it's an umbrella term that encompasses lots of different practices such as Scrum and XP and Scrumban and mob programming and DevOps, and it uses some of Kanban, but it's come out of the lean movement, and it's come out of the Toyota manufacturing process. And so it can be quite reasonably viewed as a subset of lean. And so the really important takeaway here is that I've just put a few different practices down there, and there's a lot more, and there will probably be a lot more in the future, and these things will evolve. But they all are evolving along the principles, the values and the principles contained within the manifesto. So the next slide. Now, when you're around Agile for a while, you'll hear this concept of a mindset. Now, mindset is not an attitude. It's not what you feel like. What it means, it was actually termed by a guy called Ahmed Sidki, and he was the Chief Agile Officer, or the head in charge of Agile for Riot Games. And he kind of coined this idea that don't worry so much about the practices, because there's going to be lots of them. But what's really, really important is this mindset. And what that mindset means is that the word is embodied, which means that you take on board, or you live these 4 values and the 12 principles. And if, as a software developer, you do this and you do it religiously, then you will develop an agile mindset. And we don't want to worry too much about the practices, because they're going to evolve over time. But if we want to get really good at agile, what we need to do is we need to instill this agile mindset. So what are these values and principles? Let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to go through all of them because it'll take too long. So, and hopefully you're going to see the history here. So what the first 4 values are the key. And so it says that there's individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And this comes from the idea of those multidisciplinary teams, these product development teams, because what we noticed with those really good product development teams is that people spoke and interacted and communicated very richly, whereas the worst teams would be following set processes, and they would be hamstrung by the particular tools that they'd have. And so they said that really one of the key values here is that we have to encourage these interactions between individuals. And that becomes a really key value. Now, before I go into the other values, there's a sentence at the bottom, which is really important. And that is that while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So in other words, Agile is not, and this is where a lot of people make a mistake, it's not about individuals and interactions instead of processes and tools. You still need processes and tools. But it's more important to focus on how the individuals, what their skills are and how they interact and how they share knowledge and how they work together. That's going to be more important for the quality of the output than the processes and tools. And so the next one was working, sorry. So the next value, so back, I was going to stick on the value. So next value was working software over comprehensive documentation. So if you remember back when I spoke about the waterfall, the problem with the waterfall back in the 70s and the way they solved that with documentation, what the Agilists said is that what we really want is we want working software. We want to get increments of software into the hands of users or into testing rather than worrying too much about the documentation. We still want documentation, but it's much more important to get the software in front of the user or in front of the end user, in front of the people who are going to use it and get their feedback before taking the next iteration. Rather than documenting it up. Document it enough, do inline documentation, make sure there's some documentation, but don't go overboard with the documentation. At the same time, don't go underboard with it either. So it's about getting it just right. The third value was customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And so this came from the lean movement. And when you go into Agile in a fair bit, there's a lot of Japanese words that they used. But one of the ideas of lean is to really focus on what the customer value is. So, and to listen very carefully to the customer value and to adjust your processes accordingly. And so this value was about working closely with the customer rather than writing some software and saying, okay, we've written the software according to your software specification, now pay us. So the idea of close collaboration is very close to Agile. And when you see really good Agile teams, the customers are often there in the room with the coders, looking over their shoulders in the same room. And so the idea of the Agile teams is we really want to have zero distance between the engineers, the coders, and the customers. And so when we're creating Agile practices within organizations, one of the tricks is to work out how to get the customers, and now that could be an internal customer. So there's a lot of people here. Obviously, your customers will be internal customers. They will be the accounts department or the marketing department or the billing department. So those are your customers, but you want them really, really close to the coding. And how close is too close? Well, every time you have got some code which you can demonstrate, then you should be getting customer feedback. And so this is what they saw as an absolute core value, to say what we want is we know that the requirements are going to change. We know that. So let's just learn how to collaborate with a customer. We'll still have a contract, but we're not going to hide behind our contract. And we're not going to fight through contracts. The last value is a similar one, and was being able to respond to a change. And so this is the idea that rather than sticking to what was in the software requirement specification and following that until it's over and then shipping then, was to understand that sometimes those requirements of our customers, when they briefed us, they get it wrong. They're human. And so someone says that I want the software to do 1, 2, 3, and they forget about 4, or once they see the feedback, they go, actually number 2 wasn't so important requirement, but number 3 really is. And so Agile is about understanding that our customers and our users are going to change their minds as they go through time and as they start to familiarize themselves with the software. And if we're going to deliver value to them, because that's what we're trying to do, which will deliver value, then what we want to do is to be able to respond to these changes rather than following a plan. So this is the key. So the idea that Agile is about really living these values on a day-to-day basis in software delivery. Now, in order to do that, the authors came up with 12 principles. So let's have a look at those 12 principles. The next slide. So I'm not going to go through all of these. I was going to pick a few of them because what I'd like to do is to move to some questions and to get some feedback. But what I want to do is maybe pick a few. And what I'm really trying to do is to emphasize that the principles and the values have got really, really solid foundations. They've really been thought about very well. And they've been tested over time to work. So let's go through number one. So our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through earliest and continuous delivery of valuable software. Now, the really important part of everything to do with Agile, with Scrum and with the Agile Manifesto and XP, is that the language is very precise. And so we have to look at every sentence with a fair bit of thought. So when they say our highest priority, they really mean it is our highest priority. This is the most important thing that we must do. And the next part of the sentence is to satisfy the customer through earliest and continuous delivery. So it can't be 3 months' time. It's got to be early and all the time. So when we say early, really as soon as we've got some sort of a working prototype, even if it's not polished or finished. If we're working on a website, it might be just a wireframe. If we're working on an API. Thank you. So they're really focusing on this idea of getting it out quickly, getting it in front of the customer. But then the last part of the sentence says valuable software. Now, what does valuable mean? Well, value means the value in terms of the customer. What is important for the customer? Not what's important for the coder, or not what's important for the business analyst, or not what's important for anything else, but what does the customer really, really find valuable? And sometimes customers aren't very good at telling you what they are, what they value. And so what we have to do is we put the software in front of them, and we ask them, we say, how does that working? And they might not like it, they might think it's fantastic. And we're always asking is, how does this add value to your work? And so just in that first principle, there's actually, we can spend hours on how to get teams to actually understand what is valuable from the customer's perspective. Let's go to another one. Would someone like to volunteer which one that we can talk about? So just in your text box, just shoot one and just name one. Anyone you'd like me to talk about? 2. Okay, we've got a 2. So the second principle is that we welcome changing requirements. We already mentioned that in the one of the values. But even if it's late in development. So what we're saying here is that an agile team is very, very forgiving and it has to build flexibility into its processes. And the second part of the sentence is actually really interesting because it says that agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. So what that's saying is that the customer's not changing their mind to be difficult. The customer's requirements are probably changing because the market is changing or their world is changing, and they are trying to do the best thing for their business. And we as developers, we have to understand that even at the last hour, if they want to change the requirements because it's going to make them more competitive, then we should do whatever we can to facilitate that. And so, how does that happen? So this is then the different practices. What are the practices that we can do to make late changes? And ultimately it comes back to shipping increments of software in shorter and shorter cycles, very small pieces of very small shipments. And the quicker that we can ship, the quicker that we can get feedback, and those changes are not dramatic. All right, what's another principle that we'd like to talk about? Someone else can put a number in the chat box. Five, okay. Build projects around motivated individuals. So what this is going back to the value around interactions and people. And there's a lot of talk, or there's a lot of agile practices will go into giving the teams a lot of autonomy. So most coders, most developers are very intelligent, very creative, and they love to be given a task to do, a challenge to overcome. And rather than treating people like robots and telling them they have to code this tiny bit and they have to do it by this date, Agile creates environments which enables this very high level of creative productivity to occur. And there's very little management. In fact, in most Agile teams, you could say there's no management, or that the individuals manage themselves. There might be facilitation, and there usually is, but there's very little top-down management. And so when one of the principles says to build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done, that then creates a whole bunch of rituals and belief systems in teams. And so when we're looking at very agile organizations, their teams are highly autonomous. The motivation is there because the teams are working together without managers telling them what to do or micromanaging them, and they are trusted. There's a lot of psychological safety built into the teams. And as you go into building an agile practice in your organization, a lot of work goes into and a lot of thought goes into what can we do to bring out the best creativity of the developers and to stop treating them like these sort of pseudo robots, if you like. So I've got a projects and agile relationship. So that's a really good question. I think what we might do is to start to branch into kind of general questions at the moment, because if someone has got a bit of a question, then chances are somebody else is having it. Now, you'll find that many people in Agile will say there is no such thing as an Agile project. Now, some people will say that. And the reason that they say that is because they define a project as having a fixed, scope and a time and a budget, and that's how they view a project. Whereas what an Agile team does is basically continuously work on and ship a product. So most Agile teams would see themselves as being part of a product team, not in terms of a project team. But it is a semantic trick. I mean, anything like on the weekend, I'm going to be building some shelves in the garage. And I can call those shelves a product, or I can call it a project. So I tend to disagree with a lot of the Agile people that say that there is no such thing as an Agile project. I think that projects exist, and that projects is a good way to describe something which needs more than one task. So if you've got one task to do, it's a task. If you've got more than one task to do, it's a project. And so I don't have a problem with calling Agile product development projects. I do not see any problem with that. The problem occurs when we try to force standard or waterfall project methodologies, Gantt charts and PERT, program evaluation runtime techniques, on top of an Agile process. It doesn't work. The project method or the waterfall method will tend to overwrite it. But there's no reason you can't say we're going to ship a feature, we're going to call that a project, and ship that feature in an Agile manner. I personally don't have a problem with it, but some Agile people do. Another question or another principle you'd like me to go into?
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for this explanation for agility principles. But what I want to know about this principle, are they related to the 4 value? And how do classifying these 12s to each value, if possible?
Yes. All right. Well, in other words, does 1 and 2 and 3 belong to a value? There is no direct linkage between the values and the principles. So what's the best way to describe this? If you like, the value is kind of the very high level direction of what we're trying to do. And these principles are supposed to support those values. So in other words, if we went back to the values, you can just go back a slide, please, Hisham. So if I went, okay, let's take the fourth value, responding to change over following a plan. So if I was to say to a team, we now have to respond to change instead of following a plan or over following a plan. How are we going to do that? And the team would go, well, I don't know. And so what the authors did is they said, well, why don't we give you some principles, some design principles, some work design principles to help you out. Now, they're not fundamental, but here is a starting point. Some work design. So let's go to the principles again. So we can go over some of these principles and we'll see how they can help. So can we just go back for a sec? The previous one for values. So responding to change and following a plan. Before we go to the principles, let's just to think about it for a second. So we have to think where the change is going to come from. Are the changes going to come from a manager? Are they going to come from a customer? Who's going to approve those changes? So there's quite a few questions which comes when we say we're going to execute these values. There's quite a few questions which come up. And the principles try to answer those questions. So let's go to the principles again. So where is the principles that correlate to the change? So the first principle is about continuous delivery. And we know that if we have continuous delivery and feedback, then that's going to be able to respond to a change quite well. So let's go to the next one. So this is specifically relates to, number 2, specifically relates to changing requirements. Number 3, the third principle, which is frequent shipping of software, that also helps to respond to change because we don't have to wait so long before the change comes. The fourth one is business people and developers are working together. So in other words, once we understand if their requirements change, if the business people's requirements change, then we can take those changes in very quickly. Number 5, that doesn't really speak to responding to change, but it enables it. So building around motivated individuals. If people are energized, then they're more willing to make a change. So it's not direct, it's indirect. Number 6, most efficient, effective way of conveying information. So here what we're saying is that it's a principle about trying to talk directly to the customer. And because there's a rich interchange of information, then that also helps respond to a change more quickly. Working software doesn't seem to go into responding to change. That's not really a principle that goes into responding to change. So that one hasn't got to do with that value. Number 8, Agile process promotes sustainable development. What that means is that we want to maintain the energy of the developers so that they can respond to change. Continuous attention to technical excellence, that's not so much. What that really means is that if we are producing really good code and we do change, then we don't have to go back. We're not going to break things. So in some ways, that's also helping responding to change. Number 10, simplicity, this is very much about responding to change because we're not bloating out the programming. We're making it very, very efficient, very minimalist code. We're not having feature bloat. We're not having too many features. And that gives us the ability not to build up too much technical debt. So that helps us respond to change. Number 11, the best architectures emerge from self-organizing teams. So that's a little bit like which one is that one? Number 5. It's a little bit, number 5 and number 11 are quite similar. And what they're saying is that without micromanagement, we find the best solutions come out. And that's not really got to do with change, but it's not unlike it. And at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more efficient, which is not, it's an overall thing. So in that one value, there was about 9 or 10 of the principles that supported that value. And we could go through each of the values like that.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help, or does it clarify it a bit?
You give me a little bit brightness about what in my mind, and I could develop it later on. Okay.
It must be very difficult because English is quite a complicated language, and I wouldn't like to understand this as my second language. So I'm hoping it makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now, Hisham, I think it's my hour's nearly up. So let's just go to, and that was a really good question, and I think that really went to the essence of it. So what I might do is just finish off the slides, and then we'll open up to other questions. So the next slide. So I just want to recap the things which I really wanted to drill in is that Agile is a response to the waterfall problem. Now, next week, we're going to go into where we would do Agile and where we wouldn't. Now, in some projects, waterfall is not a problem. When we're building a skyscraper, we build it through using waterfall techniques. It's not a problem. It's fine. But the problem is when we're shipping software that is so late that the users don't need it, and it can't respond to the changes, and that it becomes bloated with features that people don't want, and all of the problems about recoding. So when we are getting into projects which have got those problems, which a lot of software projects are like that, maybe 80% of them, then Agile is a very good response to that problem. The next thing that I hope you walk away with is that these principles have evolved over a long time. They weren't just invented in someone's sleep. There's been a lot of thinking, a lot of development over nearly 90 years now. I don't know if this was new to you or not, but some people are quite surprised that Agile and Lean are so closely related. And it's an important one because as we go into advanced Agile, we go more and more towards ideas from Lean. And finally, when you hear people talk about the Agile mindset, it really is just that embodiment of the 4 values and the 12 principles. And the more that you live with them, the more comfortable you become running Agile projects or Agile programs. And so the last slide is just my contact details. So, you please feel free to link in or carry on the conversation over Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on both of those platforms. But this is only the first the first session of 3. And what this is a condensed fundamentals course. And, you know, I would normally run a fundamentals course over either 1 or 2 days inside an organization. So we're condensing it right down to 3 hours. So don't feel bad if a lot of that information went over your head. And that's why there's lots of links in there for you to follow up. So that's the end of the formal presentation, but I think, Hisham, we've got some time. You know, I've got, you know, at least I've got, you know, as much time as you need to answer any questions and to go back into the theory if you want me to.
Okay, thank you, John. Let us get some question if the people has any question. You can write people even the question in Arabic, and we will deliver in English format for or English language, sorry, for John. Okay. It seems good. Some people say thank you, wonderful and effective delivery.
Yeah, thanks, Wahid.
Okay, there is no questions. Okay, thank you, John. We are look forward for the next coming 2 sessions. As we agree, I can share this presentation, okay, with other people. Yep. Okay, great. And they have their contact if there any question in between the session. You are very helpful to answer the question. Okay.
Yes, but as also if there's new information, I do quite a bit of posting on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and so if you're interested in the subject, they're not bad places to follow.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Good night,
rest
everyone.
of day. Good night. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.